The street market was loud and alive, voices calling, merchants shouting, and the smell of roasted food hanging heavy in the air. David pushed his way through the crowd, his mind fixed on one simple task. He only wanted to buy meat for dinner. Nothing more, nothing less. He was tired from work, and all he wanted was a good meal to fill his empty stomach. The market stretched under glowing lanterns, their light bouncing off strange stalls filled with goods from across the galaxy. Some vendors sold fruits that glowed faintly in the dark. Others sold dried spices that made the air sting in the nose. There were cages of small animals, glass jars filled with alien liquids, and strange fabrics shimmering like stars. David ignored most of it. His eyes searched for the butcher's stall. But then something strange caught his attention. A group of people stood in silence near the far end of the market, their heads turned toward a stall that did not sell food. No spices, no cloth. Instead, it had iron bars. David frowned. At first, he thought it was for animals, but the whispers around him told a different story. Inside the cages were women. Not human women, but alien women. Their eyes glowed faintly. Their skin carried colors no human skin had ever carried: blue, silver, and pale green. Each one looked broken, silent, and afraid. David's chest tightened. He had seen many things since humans colonized new worlds, but this was something else. Then he saw her in the last cage, sitting in silence with her knees pulled to her chest. Was an alien woman different from the rest? Her skin was pale gray, her hair long and black, and her eyes burned like fire, though they were filled with sadness. She looked directly at David, not with fear, but with something else, something like defiance. "She is a widow," one man whispered beside him. Dangerous blood, cursed blood. The word widow echoed in David's mind. What did it mean here on this alien world? Why was it said like a curse? The merchant running the stall stepped forward. His voice was rough. "Widow for sale. Strong hands, broken spirit. Take her cheap. No one wants her." David felt his stomach twist. The crowd moved back slightly. No one dared to step closer. It was as if this woman carried some shadow that frightened even the boldest buyer. But David could not look away. Her eyes were locked on his, steady, searching, as if she already knew something about him. He shook his head and muttered to himself, "No, I just came for meat," but his feet betrayed him. Step by step he moved closer. The closer he came, the stronger the silence grew around him. He heard the whispers again. "Foolish human, does he not know? A widow brings only death." David's hand reached into his pocket without thinking. He pulled out the credits he had saved for the week. His own voice surprised him when he spoke. "I'll take her," the merchant laughed. A cruel sound. "You buy her, human, you buy her curse. No return, no refund. She is yours." The cage was opened. The alien widow stepped out slowly. Her movements were graceful yet heavy, as if every step carried pain. She did not bow her head. She stood tall, though her body carried bruises and scars. For a moment, the crowd stared in silence, and then they turned away, wanting no part in what they believed would be disaster. David could not explain what he was feeling. Fear mixed with guilt. Anger mixed with something he did not want to name. He had not come here to be a savior. He had only come for meat. Yet here he was, walking through the busy market with an alien woman beside him, her eyes still fixed on him as though trying to read his soul. They left the market together. The noise behind them faded, replaced by the quiet sound of their steps on the stone road. The widow spoke for the first time, her voice low and broken. One word. "Hunted." David stopped walking. His heart jumped. He looked at her, trying to understand, but she said nothing more. Only that one word, like a warning, like a shadow crawling after them. The night grew colder. The stars above seemed sharper, and David felt as if unseen eyes were already watching them. He thought of the cage, of her defiant eyes, of the whispers calling her cursed, and deep inside he knew this was no simple purchase. This was the beginning of something that would change his life forever. David walked with the alien widow through the narrow streets. The lamps flickered weakly above them, throwing long shadows on the cracked stone. The market noise was gone now, and the silence felt heavier. He could still hear the words she had spoken. Hunted. It echoed in his mind like a warning he could not shake. When they reached his home, a small house made of metal and stone at the edge of the colony, David opened the door slowly. The widow stepped inside without fear, her eyes moving carefully across the simple room. There was a wooden table, 2 chairs, and shelves filled with tools and broken machines David had collected. She studied everything as if each item carried a secret. David lit a small lamp. The flame glowed warmly and he turned to her. "Sit," he said softly. He pulled out a chair. She sat, but her back was straight. Her hands folded on her lap like she was waiting for judgment. David went to the kitchen corner. He pulled out bread, some dried fruit, and a jug of water. He placed it all in front of her. "Eat," he told her. She looked at the food, then at him. Her dark eyes narrowed. Slowly, she shook her head. She whispered something in her broken human tongue. "Only one word again, poison." David blinked. "It's not poison," he said quickly. He took a piece of bread, bit it, and chewed, showing her, but still she did not move. Finally, she reached for the water. Her hands shook slightly as she lifted the jug. She took one small sip, then pushed it away. The silence grew heavy again. David sat across from her. He tried to study her face, the marks on her skin, the way her lips pressed tightly as if holding back words. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you say hunted?" She looked at him. Her eyes softened for a moment. She touched her chest with her hand, then traced a line across the table with her finger. A shape, a symbol, glowing faintly blue for just a second before it faded. David's heart skipped. He had seen marks like that before, symbols used by alien soldiers in the war. "You," he whispered. "You're connected to them." Her face darkened. She shook her head quickly. "No soldier," she said in broken words. Her hand clenched into a fist. She pointed at herself again. "Widow?" Then she pointed out the window to the dark streets beyond. Her voice trembled as she spoke one more word. "Hunters." At that moment, David felt a cold shiver run through him. He stood up and moved to the window, pulling the curtain slightly. Outside the street was empty, but his chest tightened. He had the strong feeling that eyes were indeed watching. He turned back to her. "Why me?" he asked. "Why look at me in the market?" The widow lowered her gaze. For the first time she looked vulnerable. Not defiant, she whispered. "Choice." David did not understand, but something in her voice sent a wave of unease through him. Night fell deeper and the house grew quiet. David set a blanket on the floor for her, but she did not lie down. She sat against the wall, eyes half closed, as if waiting for danger to break through the door. David tried to sleep on his bed, but he could not. Every sound outside made him open his eyes. Every creak of wood felt like a footstep approaching. He looked once more at the alien widow. Her head leaned back against the wall, but her hand clutched a hidden blade he had not noticed before. She was not helpless, she was ready. As David closed his eyes again, one thought burned in his mind. He had not bought a stranger. He had brought danger into his home, and yet deep inside, he felt something else. Something that told him this danger was only the beginning of a greater story. The night passed slowly. David barely slept. Every sound outside made him restless, every shadow felt alive. The alien widow never truly slept either. Her eyes closed for moments, but her hand stayed on the blade hidden at her side. When morning light touched the room, David sat up. He found her still awake. Watching him for a moment, he felt as if she was studying him. Trying to measure if he could be trusted, David sighed. He placed food on the table again, bread, water, and some cooked meat. This time, she did not refuse completely. She picked up the bread and chewed carefully, her eyes never leaving his face. Finally, David spoke, his voice low but firm. "You need to tell me why they are after you." She paused. Swallowing slowly, she tapped her chest again, then touched the scar across her arm. Her broken voice carried only a few words. "Husband. Soldier. Dead." David leaned forward. "Your husband was a soldier," she nodded, her eyes clouded with something heavy, not only grief but shame. She pressed her palm against the wooden table, and again faint glowing lines formed. This time not just a symbol, but a full pattern. David's breath caught. He recognized it. It was the mark of the alien military command, the same symbols painted on war machines that once fought against humans. His hand tightened into a fist. He whispered, "You were his wife, and now you carry his mark." Her voice trembled. "Widow," she said, cursed. She touched the glowing pattern, then pointed at herself. "They say I carry." "His secret?" David frowned. "Secret?" "What secret?" The woman's eyes darkened. She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if the walls themselves could betray them. "Code," she whispered. David blinked. "Code? What kind of code?" Her hands moved quickly. shaping invisible letters in the air. Husband, gave. Before death, she struggled to form the words, code hides.
In me, David's chest tightened. If what she was saying was true,
It meant she carried something dangerous, something her enemies desperately wanted. A code linked to alien weapons or technology. A code that could shift the balance of power. He sat back in silence, his mind raced. If humans found out, they would take her, use her, and maybe even kill her when she was no longer useful. If aliens caught her, they would end her life for carrying the secret of a fallen soldier. The widow's eyes softened. She spoke again. Hunted? By both. David swallowed hard. He rubbed his forehead. His life had been simple yesterday. Work, market, food, survival. Now in one night, it had turned into something larger than himself. You should have left me, the widow whispered. Her voice was quiet, but there was no anger in it, only sorrow. Now you are target too. David looked at her. For a moment he almost agreed. It would have been easier to walk away, to let her remain in the cage. But then he remembered her eyes in the market. Sad yet filled with defiance, they had reached for him. Chosen him? No, he said, shaking his head slowly. I can't just throw you back, not now. Her lips parted slightly in surprise, but she said nothing. A sudden sound broke the silence. A soft scrape against the outside wall. Both of them froze. David reached for the small rifle hidden under his bed. The widow's hand was already on her blade. For a long moment they listened. The sound faded, replaced by silence. But the tension did not leave. David whispered. They know you're here. The widow's dark eyes met his. And for the first time there was no defiance, only fear. She whispered one word that sent chills down David's spine. Tonight. The warning from the widow echoed through David's mind all day. Tonight, she had said, and he could not forget it. Every time he looked at the window, he felt the same cold fear, that someone was already out there waiting. But the day passed quietly. No one came to the house, no one knocked. The silence was almost worse than noise. David fixed broken tools in the corner, trying to distract himself while the widow sat at the table, her eyes scanning every shadow in the room. At last, David broke the silence. He pulled out a scrap of paper and a pencil. He drew a circle, then pointed. Circle, he said slowly. She tilted her head, her dark eyes curious. She touched the paper. Circle, she repeated. Her voice was soft, careful, as if every word might betray her. David nodded. He drew a square. Square, he said. She tried to copy the word, her accent heavy. Square. They both laughed softly, the sound breaking the heavy air for the first time since she entered his home. The small moment surprised David for a second. She did not look like a cursed widow or a hunted target. She looked almost human, almost like a friend. As the hours passed, they shared more words. She pointed at the lamp. Light, she whispered. He nodded. Yes, light. Then she pointed at herself, pausing as if unsure what to say. Finally she whispered, Sarah. David blinked. Your name? She nodded, her lips curved into the faintest smile. Sarah. The name stayed in his mind like a spark in the dark. He had been calling her widow in his thoughts, but now she was Sarah. Later, as the sun began to set, David cooked a small meal. This time she ate without fear, slowly, cautiously, but she ate. When he passed her a piece of meat, her fingers brushed his. He felt a strange warmth run through him. He did not pull away, she did not either. But the bond was not built only on words or food. It was built on silence, too. On the way she watched his every move. On the way he made space for her in his small home without question. They were two strangers tied together by danger. Yet something else was growing beneath the fear. As night fell, David set the lamp low. The air grew tense again. Sarah sat near the door, her blade resting across her lap, her eyes never closed. David moved quietly to the window, peering into the street. Shadows stretched long under the moonlight. And once again he felt watched. He whispered, They'll come. Sarah's voice was low, but steady. Yes, David turned back. And then why stay? Why not run? Sarah looked at him for a long moment, her gaze sharp but gentle. She touched her chest and then pointed at him. Choice, she said again, her voice stronger this time. David felt his throat tighten. He did not know why she had chosen him in the market, but now with her sitting in his home, whispering her name, sharing her food, he realized it mattered less why she chose him. What mattered was that she did. The night grew colder. David lit a second lamp. The faint glow painted the walls in gold. He sat near her, his rifle across his knees. She looked at him, then slowly, She lowered her blade to the ground. For the first time since she had come into his life, she allowed herself to rest. Her head leaned against the wall. Her eyes half closing, David watched her silently. She looked fragile in that moment, but he knew better. He had seen the strength in her eyes, the fire that even grief could not destroy. Hours passed in silence, and then, just before midnight, David heard it, the soft crunch of footsteps outside. He gripped his rifle. Sarah's eyes snapped open. She did not speak. She only reached for her blade again. Together they waited in the silence. Two strangers bound now not only by fear but by trust. The footsteps outside grew louder. David's grip tightened on his rifle. Sarah's hand curled around her blade. The silence of the night was gone, replaced by a tension so sharp it felt like the air itself could shatter. David moved to the window, peering through the small crack in the curtain. At first he saw nothing. Then his eyes caught a flicker of movement. Shadows slipping between the houses. Figures dressed in dark armor moving with purpose, hunters. He turned back to Sarah, whispering, "They're here." She did not answer. She already knew. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, the fire inside them burning brighter than before. She pressed her palm to the floorboards. Faint lines of blue light flickered beneath her skin before fading. David realized she was preparing. The first crash came suddenly, the front door shaking under the force of a heavy strike. David raised his rifle. Sarah stood tall, her blade gleaming faintly in the lamplight. A second crash followed. Then the door burst open. 3 men rushed inside, armored, masked, their weapons shining cold. Their eyes were fixed on Sarah. Not David, he was only in their way. David fired. The first shot echoed like thunder. One of the intruders fell, but the others did not stop. One charged at David, knocking the rifle from his hands. David stumbled back, struggling to hold his ground. But Sarah moved faster. Her blade flashed, striking the attacker's weapon aside. She spun with fluid grace, her scars forgotten, her body moving with deadly precision for the first time. David saw her not as a broken widow, but as something fierce, something powerful. The third man raised his gun at her, but before he could fire, her hand glowed with blue energy. The air crackled, and a wave of light burst outward. The man was thrown back against the wall, his weapon clattering to the ground. David froze, his breath caught. She had not just fought. She had unleashed power no human could match. Energy still flickered faintly across her hands, glowing like fire contained beneath her skin. The room fell silent again. The 3 men lay unconscious, one groaning in pain. Sarah stood still, her chest rising and falling. Her eyes met David's, and for the first time, he saw fear, not in her but in himself. Fear of what she truly was, David whispered. "What are you?" Sarah's voice was low, trembling but firm. "Not soldier, not weapon, widow." She looked at the fallen men, then back at David. "Now more will come." As if her words had called them, more shadows moved outside. David could hear them now, voices shouting, boots hitting the ground. The first attack had only been a test. The real strike was still to come. David grabbed his rifle again. He turned to Sarah. "We have to run," but she shook her head. "No run. They find anywhere." She pressed her hand against her chest, her voice breaking. "Code inside, they will not stop." David's mind raced. He had seen courage in soldiers before, but Sarah's was different. She was not fighting for glory, not for war. She was fighting simply to survive, to keep the secret she carried safe. He moved closer to her, lowering his voice. "Then we fight together." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she had not expected him to say that. Slowly she nodded. The fire in her gaze burned brighter. The sound outside grew louder, more footsteps, more weapons loading. The walls of the house shook faintly. The attack had only begun. David glanced at the broken door, then at Sarah. "If they want you, they'll have to go through both of us." Sarah lifted her blade, blue sparks dancing faintly across its edge. For the first time she smiled, not with joy, but with determination. Together they stood side by side, ready to face the storm that was about to break into their lives. The night was far from over. The first attack had failed, but the hunters outside were regrouping. David could hear them moving, their voices sharp, their weapons ready. Inside the small house, the air felt heavy with smoke and fear. Sarah stood by the broken door, her blade glowing faintly with blue sparks. Her breathing was steady, but her eyes carried a storm. David stepped closer, his rifle in hand. "They'll come again," he whispered. Sarah nodded. "Yes, Her voice was calm, almost too calm. They will come until I am gone. David frowned. Why? What makes you so important? He had seen her strength. But he knew there had to be more. No one would risk this much for just one woman. She turned toward him. Her gaze was sharp. Her words broken but heavy. Not me. Code? David's grip on the rifle tightened. He remembered the glowing marks she had drawn on his table. The strange energy that had blasted the hunters across the room. What kind of code? He asked slowly. Sarah looked down. Her hand pressed against the scar on her chest. She whispered, "Before death." Husband gave. Inside me, David froze. Inside you, she nodded. Her hand moved to her skin, fingers tracing faint glowing lines that pulsed faintly under the surface. He put it here. Hidden. Secret. David's stomach twisted. He finally understood. She wasn't just a widow, she was a vessel, carrying something no one else could. What does the code do? He asked. His voice tight, Sarah's eyes met his, dark and full of fire. It wakes the machines, she said softly. David's heart sank. Machines, she stepped closer, lowering her voice. War machines, left from war. Buried underground, still waiting, still alive. David's mind raced. He had heard rumors of alien war engines. Massive machines of destruction left abandoned after the war. If Sarah truly carried the key to them, then both humans and aliens would want her. To control her, to control that power. No one can have it, she whispered. Her hand shook as she spoke. If humans take, war begins again. If aliens take, war never ends. My husband died to hide it. He trusted me to carry. David swallowed hard. The weight of her words pressed against him like a stone. She wasn't cursed because she was a widow. She was cursed because she carried the seed of another war. You should have let me stay in cage, she whispered bitterly. Safe for all, not safe for me. But safe for all. David shook his head, his voice low but firm. No, you don't belong in a cage. Her eyes searched his face, testing his resolve. Then you choose death with me, she said quietly. Before David could answer, a loud blast shook the walls. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The hunters outside had brought heavier weapons. The second wave had begun. David's pulse raced. He looked at her. If they want the code, what do we do? Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. Then she spoke. We run, but not far. I show you where machines sleep. Only you must see. Only human can decide. David blinked. Me, she nodded. I chose you. Her voice trembled. But there was no doubt in her tone. Not by chance, not random in market. I saw your eyes. You are not soldier, not hunter. You are choice. David felt a weight pressed down on him, heavier than the rifle in his hands. He had thought he was saving a stranger, but now he realized she had saved him too, by pulling him into something far greater than himself. The house shook again. Another blast struck. Sarah's eyes burned in the dim light. Decide fast, David. Hunters will not stop, and if they break me, galaxy burns again. David stared at her, his heart pounding. In one night, his life had turned into something far beyond markets and meat. He stood at the edge of a choice that could decide the fate of two worlds, and outside the hunters closed in. The walls of David's house shook again. Smoke drifted through the cracks, dust filled the air. Outside, the hunters shouted commands in a language he could not understand. Their footsteps were closing in. Steady and merciless, David looked at Sarah. Her blade burned faintly blue, her eyes glowing like embers in the dark. She stood tall despite her bruises, despite her scars. There was no fear in her face, only determination. They will not stop, she whispered. Her voice was steady now. They want the code. They want war. David's chest tightened. He had thought this would end with a simple choice, protect her or hand her over. But now he saw the truth. There was no simple way out. If he gave her to the hunters, the galaxy would burn. If he kept her, he would be hunted until the end of his life. The front door creaked. Shadows moved against the broken frame. The hunters were ready to break in. David raised his rifle, his heart pounding like a drum. We can't stay here, he said. Sarah nodded. No. We run to the place where machines sleep. I show you. Then you must choose. Destroy or awaken. Her words hit him harder than the blast outside. Destroy or awaken. He was no soldier, no leader. He was just one man who had gone to the market for meat. But now fate had dropped this burden into his hands. The door burst open. Light spilled into the room. Hunters rushed inside. David fired without thinking. The recoil slammed into his shoulder. One man fell, but two more entered. Sarah moved with speed, her blade slicing through the dark. Sparks of blue energy burst from her hands, sending another enemy flying against the wall. The fight was fierce, but they were too many. For every one that fell, more entered. David's breath came in ragged gasps. Sweat stung his eyes. Sarah fought like fire. But even fire could be drowned, David, she shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. Now decide. Her eyes locked on his, glowing bright, desperate yet unbroken. She was giving him the choice, not keeping it for herself. She was trusting him with the fate she carried. David's mind spun. He could run with her. He could take her to the place she spoke of. He could try to destroy the code. But he also knew if the code was destroyed, humanity might lose a weapon that could one day save them. If it was awakened, though, millions could die. The hunters surged again. David fired until his rifle clicked empty. Sarah stood beside him, her blade dripping with light. They were cornered, the house collapsing around them, and in that final moment David made his choice. He dropped the empty rifle, grabbed Sarah's hand, and pulled her toward the back door. "We're not dying here," he said, his voice raw. "Show me the machines." Her eyes widened, then softened. She squeezed his hand for the first time. She smiled, not with sorrow, but with hope. "You choose," she whispered. "Now the galaxy waits. Together." They ran into the night, hunters chasing. Shadows stretching across the broken streets, the colony lights flickered above. The world seemed to hold its breath as two figures disappeared into the darkness, carrying with them the power to save or to destroy, and somewhere far beneath the ground, in forgotten tunnels of metal and stone, the machines slept, waiting for the choice of one human and one widow.